The next morning, the three of them drove to a quiet rural area outside Enugu, near a small hill. The road was rough and dusty, lined with bush and old trees. They arrived at a small house with a zinc roof. A woman in her late 60s was sitting outside, peeling cassava. Her hair was grey. Her skin was rough. Her eyes were tired. She wore a faded wrapper and old slippers. Detective Judith stepped out first. "Grace," she called gently. The woman looked up. Angela and Michael stepped out of the car together. The woman stared at them. Her face froze. The knife in her hand dropped. She stood slowly, trembling. Then she whispered one word. "Michael." The dusty wind swirled quietly around the small compound as Michael and Angela stood still, staring at the older woman before them. She looked like someone who had carried too many sorrows for one lifetime. Her eyes, though weak, were wide with shock. Her mouth trembled as she covered it with both hands, dropping the cassava peels to the ground. Her knees gave way as she fell to the wooden bench behind her. Her breathing became unsteady. The silence between them stretched, very long and heavy, and then tears began to stream down her cheeks. Not the kind of tears that came from pain alone, but those that carried years of shame, regret, and lost hope. Inside the little house, time seemed to stop. Judith, the retired social worker, stood quietly, her hands folded respectfully in front of her. She didn't speak. She had already seen too many stories like this in her lifetime. Too many broken families. Too many people swallowed by war, poverty, and silence. But something about this one was different. This was hot in a deeper way. Grace, the old woman in the faded wrapper, finally reached for a small rusted tin box on the table beside her. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were a few old photos, one birth certificate, a tiny Bible with frayed edges, and a pair of tiny baby shoes, brown and cracked with age. She touched each item like they were made of glass. Then she brought out a small picture. In it were two children, one a baby boy with a full head of hair, the other a toddler girl in a tiny dress, standing beside a woman who looked just like Grace, only younger and stronger. That picture had been taken in front of their old home before everything collapsed. Michael and Angela stared at it. Something deep inside Angela shifted. Something old, buried, and long forgotten. Her heart felt like it stopped beating. The woman in the picture had her own nose. The boy in the baby cap had Michael's exact smile. Something clicked in a way that words could never explain. Grace wiped her tears slowly and began to speak, not loudly, not with pride, just a soft, tired voice full of old memories. She told them about the life she once had in Enugu, about how she married young and gave birth to two beautiful children. Michael first, then Angela 2 years later. Her husband was a mechanic, hardworking but poor. They lived in a single-room apartment in coal camp. Life was hard, but they had each other. They shared food, bathed their children together, and dreamed of better days. But those days never came. When Angela was just 4 and Michael 6, tragedy struck. Her husband felt terribly ill. It began as a fever, then chest pain, then coughing blood. Before they could raise enough money to take him to a proper hospital, he died in her arms. That moment broke something inside her. Grace was left alone with 2 children, no job, no support, no hope. She begged neighbors, she washed clothes, she sold firewood, but it was never enough. The landlord threatened to throw her out. She fell sick from exhaustion and barely had strength to cook or bathe the children. Then came the riot. It started from a nearby market, grew quickly, and exploded into full-blown chaos. People were running, shouting, carrying children, hiding under beds. Angry mobs burned shops, slashed tires, looted houses. It was during this madness that Grace made the worst decision of her life. She ran out of the house barefoot, carrying little Angela on her back and holding Michael's hand. But the crowd grew wild. Fire burst from a nearby car. Someone threw a bottle that shattered beside her. She tripped, fell, and injured her arm. Angela fell too. Michael cried out. In the confusion, Grace told Michael to run with Angela. She pushed them away, screaming at them to go to the nearby mission house. She promised she would come later. She never found them again. For days, she searched the streets of Enugu. She walked barefoot from one church to another, from one hospital to the next, from orphanages to police stations. But the records were scattered. The officers were overwhelmed. Nobody knew where her children were. One man told her a boy was found near the church. Another said a girl was taken to an orphanage after the riot. But no names, no proper files, no access. It was as if the ground had swallowed her children whole. She broke. She gave up. Grace went mad for some time. She wandered the streets, talking to herself, holding a baby shoe in her pocket. She ended up in a mental care home for 3 years. By the time she was released, her strength was gone. She started hawking oranges to survive. She lived in different villages, slept in verandas, then finally moved into the small house a kind widow offered her. And all these years, she carried that photo in her box, praying that maybe, just maybe, she would see her children again. Now, as she sat there, looking into the eyes of 2 adults who shared her blood, Grace wept until her voice cracked. The pain of losing her babies, the shame of leaving them behind, the guilt of staying silent, the fear of ever finding them again. It all came rushing back in one storm of emotion. Angela was frozen in place. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. Everything inside her screamed and twisted. Her whole life flashed before her eyes. The orphanage, the sleepless nights, the empty feeling of not knowing who you are. And now, the face she had been seeing in her dreams stood in front of her, wrinkled, tired, and crying. Suddenly, the ground beneath her felt like it was spinning. Her ears started ringing. Her hands became numb. Her legs gave away. Angela collapsed to the floor. Judith rushed to her side. Grace screamed and tried to get up but staggered back. Michael ran to his wife, lifting her gently and shouting her name, begging her to wake up. She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her breathing faint. Michael's hands were shaking as he held her, calling her over and over. Tears rolled down his cheeks uncontrollably. His shoulders shook as his face pressed against Angela's neck, praying silently and helplessly. Everything around him felt like a cruel joke. All this time, all the prayers, all the joy, the marriage, the children, it was all built on a broken foundation. He sobbed like a lost child, his arms wrapped around the woman he loved and now knew he was never supposed to have. After the meeting with Mama Grace in Enugu, Michael and Angela returned to Lagos carrying a truth too heavy for words. They didn't speak much on the flight. Angela kept looking out the window, her eyes empty, while Michael sat beside her, holding the baby photo Grace had given them. Something inside both of them had died. Knowing they were siblings wasn't just shocking. It shattered everything. Their love, their marriage, their family, their future. What used to be their greatest joy, each other, was now their deepest wound. Angela didn't return to their bedroom when they got home. She moved into the guest room and barely came out. She didn't cook. She didn't pray. She didn't even pick up David when he cried. Michael had to carry the home on his neck. He cooked, bathed the kids, dropped Lucy and Nathan at school, and tried to manage David's medical needs. But he too was running on empty. The guilt was overwhelming, not because they had done something evil knowingly, but because people would never understand they didn't know. The world wasn't kind to mistakes, no matter how innocent. Angela became worse by the day. She stopped eating and locked her room for hours. Sometimes, Michael would hear her crying softly. Other times, there was silence that scared him even more. He was afraid she might hurt herself. He removed all sharp objects from the guest room just in case. Angela's dreams became nightmares. She saw fire. She saw her mother crying. She saw herself at the altar again. Only this time, everyone in the congregation was laughing. She would wake up screaming and clutching her chest. She felt like a fraud, a sinner, an abomination. She wanted to disappear. Michael noticed blood on her bathroom sink one day. When he asked her, she waved it off and said she cut herself while shaving. But he knew better. He started checking on her every 2 hours. He called her mother, Angela's adoptive mother, but didn't say anything. He just asked her to visit soon. Maybe seeing her might help. Angela was falling apart, but Michael was not far behind. He was losing his mind trying to keep the secret buried. But the truth always has a way of escaping. And it did. A week after their return, someone from the hospital leaked the DNA results. It started with whispers, then a few screenshots. Then someone posted about a couple in Lagos who had 3 kids before finding out they were siblings. It went viral overnight. Their faces weren't in the first post, but someone who knew someone from the hospital commented with Michael's name. Before long, someone dug up their wedding photo, then a picture of Angela and the kids in front of the church, then screenshots from Angela's old Instagram page. By the 3rd day, their names were trending. People were brutal in the comments. Most didn't even care to read the full story. All they saw was the headline: "Man marries his sister. They had 3 children before finding out." Angela's bookshop page was flooded with hateful comments. Michael's business line stopped ringing. His office email was filled with mockery. Friends stopped calling. Even Linda, Angela's closest friend, sent a message that simply read, "I need time to process this." Michael switched off his phones. He didn't go to the office for a week. When he finally took Lucy to school one morning, 2 other parents whispered near the school gate. One even pulled her child away quickly, as if Lucy was infected with a curse. That night, Michael cried in the shower. The church wasn't any better. At first, the pastors didn't say anything, but during a midweek prayer service, the assistant pastor made a comment about secret sins and spiritual blindness. The next Sunday, the head pastor sent Michael a message politely, asking him and Angela to stay home for now and seek God privately. Michael stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Angela didn't even ask why they didn't go to church. She no longer cared. All she did was stare at the ceiling and mumble questions to herself. What kind of woman sleeps with her own brother? What kind of God watches this happen and says nothing? What kind of life is this? One evening, while Michael was feeding David in the kitchen, he noticed the guest room door open quietly. He turned and saw Angela walking out in a loose nightgown. She looked pale, her eyes dark and distant. She didn't say anything. She walked straight past him and went outside. Michael placed the baby in the crib and followed her quickly. He found her standing at the edge of the balcony on the 2nd floor. She was staring down, not moving. His heart dropped. He ran to her and gently pulled her back. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. He held her for a long time. After that night, Michael knew something had to be done. He started researching places for mental health support. He begged Angela to see a therapist, but she didn't respond. He called her adoptive parents and told them the whole truth. Her mother wept for almost 20 minutes Then she said she was coming the next day. Angela didn't even react when they arrived. She sat on the bed while her mother hugged her and wept. Her father didn't say anything. He just sat in a corner praying quietly. They prayed for 2 days and promised to keep praying and supporting them no matter what. But the pressure didn't stop. On the 5th day, someone from Child Protection Service came to their home. They said they had received a report based on the viral post. There was concern about the safety and well-being of the children, especially David, whose health condition was now being discussed online by strangers. The officer was kind but firm. They would have to begin an investigation into the children's welfare. A social worker would be assigned. Home visits would begin. There was even the possibility of temporary custody being considered if they found emotional inability or parental confusion. Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had built a home with love, with prayers, with sacrifice, and now that home was being watched like a crime scene. Angela said nothing when he told her. She simply turned her face to the wall and covered her ears. And just like that, the love story that once made neighbors smile, that brought joy to quiet compound in Aja, that started with laughter and matching wedding outfits, had turned into a public scandal, a private hell, and a painful tragedy that even prayer seemed unable to fix. Their once beautiful love story had become a nightmare. After the visit from child service, everything in Michael and Angela's home changed again. This time, the change was quiet but deep, like a slow leak from a bottle of water. Drop by drop, it drained their strength. Angela no longer cried every day. Her silence became heavier. Her eyes always looked far away, like she wasn't really present. She held David when necessary, fed the children when Michael was not home. But her heart was no longer in the house. It was somewhere else, somewhere cold. Michael was exhausted. He was trying so hard to hold the family together with both hands, but everything kept slipping through his fingers. The therapy appointment, the child service interviews, the endless calls from journalists, the stares at Lucy and Nathan's school. It was too much. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Angela came into the living room. She stood behind Michael, who was holding a cup of tea but not drinking it. He could feel her eyes on him. She spoke softly, but the words carried like a gunshot. I think we need to separate. Michael didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the tea. Angela walked around and sat beside him. Her voice was calm, too calm. I can't heal here. I can't breathe. I don't hate you, but every corner of this house reminds me of what we didn't know, what we lost. Michael turned to her. His eyes were red. Where will you go? Enugu, she said, with the children, just for some time. Maybe it will help them too. Michael knew she was right. The children didn't understand what was happening, but they could feel the tension. Lucy had started wetting the bed again. Nathan had become clingy and quiet. David cried more than usual. Michael nodded. They agreed to speak to a therapist again before she left. It was a female therapist, one who specialized in trauma and family restructuring. Her voice was gentle but firm. She listened more than she spoke, and when she finally did speak, she gave them one of the hardest truths of all. You two must accept what has happened, she said. You didn't sin knowingly, but the truth had to change everything. You are no longer husband and wife. That part must die. But your bond as family can still live if you allow it. Angela broke down in tears. Michael held her hand. The therapist continued. Separate. Give each other some space to heal. Give the children some peace. The marriage must end, but your love for the children must not. And so they agreed. Angela packed her things quietly. Lucy asked why mommy was folding clothes, and Angela said, "We're going on a trip." Michael hugged each child and promised he would visit every month. David was too young to understand, but Lucy and Nathan cried when they saw their bags. Angela's adoptive parents agreed to help. They still had a small house in Enugu. They offered Angela one of the rooms and promised to help with the kids. Angela accepted the help, not because she wanted pity, but because she had no strength left to stand on her own. Michael carried the bags to the car himself. Angela hugged him, one arm around his waist, the other holding David. They didn't kiss. They didn't say "I love you." But in that embrace, so much was said without words. When they drove away, Michael stood at the gate for almost an hour watching the road. Then he walked back into the house that now felt like an empty shell. He went into their bedroom, sat on the bed, then broke down. The next few weeks were slow and painful. Michael resumed work, but only part-time. He spoke to a different therapist. She encouraged him to write, to pour out his thoughts instead of bottling them up. So he began writing letters. Each letter was addressed to one of his children, not to be given to them now, but someday, when they were old enough to understand. He wanted to leave no lies behind. He wanted them to know everything, even the ugly parts, told with honesty and love. The first letter was to Lucy. He wrote about how she was the first light in their lives, how she had made him a father, how her smile brought peace. Then he explained carefully how he and her mother met, how they fell in love, how they discovered the truth, and how everything changed. He didn't hide his pain, but he didn't write with bitterness either. He wrote with love, with the hope that Lucy would understand one day. Then the second letter was for Nathan. He talked about how calm and thoughtful Nathan had always been, how he used to climb on his back and ask strange questions. He wrote about the day he was born, how he had cried out and then smiled, like he had already seen the world and accepted it. Then came to David's letter. Michael cried the most while writing that one. David had not asked to be born into confusion. He had not asked to carry a blood condition or be the reason their family searched for truth. But he had become the light that exposed the darkness. Michael poured his heart into the letter. He told David how he loved him, how he had prayed for him, how even though the world may say his birth came from a mistake, Michael would always see him as a miracle. He stored the letters in a small wooden box, locked them, then placed them inside his wardrobe under a stack of old jackets. He also wrote one final letter, not to the children, not to anyone. It was for Angela. He didn't send it, but in it, he told her how proud he was of her strength, how he wished they hadn't known the truth earlier, how he still cared for her, no longer as a wife, but as a sister, a real living sister. He wrote that he would protect her forever, that he would respect the new space between them, even though it broke him. Angela too was changing in Enugu. With time, the fresh air, the slow pace of the village, the presence of her parents started to help her breathe again. The children were happier. They played outside. They chased chickens. Lucy joined a nearby school. Nathan made friends. Angela started writing in a journal. The therapist in Lagos had encouraged it. She wrote down her pain, her confusion, her regret. But she also wrote about her dreams, her hope, her children. Slowly, she began to smile again. Not every day, but some days. She referred to Michael now as my brother when speaking to her parents. She told the children Daddy was coming to visit. When he came, she served him food. They talked briefly. They took turns playing with the kids. But they slept in different rooms. They didn't touch. They didn't say I love you anymore. Angela stopped wearing her wedding ring. Michael took his off too. The marriage, though never formally divorced yet, had died in both their hearts. What remained now was something different. Not hate, not even romance, just blood and pain. And shared memories of what could never be again. Their marriage was over. They had become siblings. Time passed, not quickly, not like flash, but slowly like water, dripping into a bucket. Drop by drop, day by day, life moved forward. Michael and Angela never got back together, not as lovers, not as husband and wife. That part of their lives was finished, buried, mourned, and respected like a loved one gone too soon. But they didn't become enemies either. They couldn't. There was too much history, too many memories, too many shared moments that could never be erased. And more importantly, there were 3 growing children who still needed love, structure, and peace. So they co-parented. Months passed after the separation. Angela grew stronger with each passing day. Michael healed slowly, and the children began adjusting to the rhythm of their new lives. In all this, one person remained far away, still living in silence, still carrying her own kind of shame. Their mother, Madam Grace. She was still in her small house on the outskirts of Enugu, aging alone, burdened with guilt for the part she had unknowingly played in her children's pain. Michael visited her quietly one afternoon while on a short trip from Lagos. He bought her medicine, helped clean her house, and sat with her under the tree for hours. They didn't say much, but before he left, he looked at her and said something simple, something she hadn't expected to hear in her lifetime. "It's time to come home, Mom." Angela agreed when Michael suggested it. She didn't hesitate. She had already forgiven their mother in her heart. She knew the woman had suffered enough, losing her children, going mad, surviving alone. It was time to rewrite the end of her story. So one weekend, they returned to that quiet village together. Michael, Angela, and the children. Nathan and Lucy helped pack Mama Grace's few belongings. David clung to her wrapper with childlike curiosity. She cried as they placed her things in the car, afraid she didn't deserve this love. But Angela held her hand and whispered, "You are our mother. You deserve peace too." They brought her to Enugu City. Angela prepared a clean room for her. Michael helped get her enrolled in a proper hospital for her arthritis and regular checkups. The children called her Grandma. Slowly, she settled in, cooking small meals, telling folk stories, and sitting with the children under the mango tree every evening. It was not perfect, but it was healing. It was peace, and she felt happy. Years passed. The world moved on. But in one quiet corner of Enugu City, a family that had been torn apart by a truth too heavy to carry was slowly putting itself back together, piece by piece. Michael and Angela never remarried. After the separation, they built new lives, but not new marriages. What they had shared was too deep, too complicated. Their bond, though no longer romantic, was still strong. It had changed into something else, something rooted in pain, truth, and respect. Not everyone would understand it, but they didn't need everyone to. They needed peace. Angela stayed in Enugu with the children and their mother, Madam Grace. Over time, she returned to teaching. It helped her feel useful again. She started a small home-based tutoring service for children in the neighborhood. It didn't make her rich, but it filled her heart. Every time she saw a child grow in confidence, she remembered what it felt like to be small and scared, and how important it was to feel seen. Madam Grace became part of the family again. At first, she found it hard to forgive herself. The guilt of what happened never fully disappeared, but Angela and Michael never blamed her. She had also been a victim of poverty, of violence, of a system that had failed her and her children. She now lived in Angela's new house in Enugu. Every morning, she swept the compound. She helped with cooking, told stories to the children, and prayed silently over her grandchildren. She had lost so much, but not now. She was determined to be present, to be a mother again, to be a grandmother, to stand by her children, no matter what the world said. Michael remained in Lagos. He continued his architect work, but with a new focus. He no longer chased wealth or fame. He started a non-profit design group that built low-cost housing and renovated abandoned schools in rural areas. He also volunteered for organizations that supported orphaned children and single parents. It became his life's work. He visited Enugu regularly. Every school holiday, he spent time with the children, birthdays, special events, and end-of-year celebrations. He was always there. He never missed a moment. He was not just a father. He was their protector, their safe place. Lucy, now 18, had grown into a beautiful, calm, and intelligent young woman. She helped her mother at home, cooked for the boys, and made sure they did their homework. She had inherited Michael's sense of design and Angela's quiet wisdom. She rarely spoke too much, but her presence was strong wherever she went. Nathan, now 14, was taller, quieter, and deeply thoughtful. He loved computers, built small robots from scrap parts, and dreamed of becoming a software engineer. He looked up to Michael. Every time his father came to visit, they would sit together and talk for hours, sometimes without saying a word. David, the youngest, had just turned 10. His health was much better now. His condition was under control, and he had learned how to manage it like a little warrior. He loved football, laughter, and storytelling. Mama Grace was his best friend. They would sit under the tree in the compound, and she would tell him stories about the old days, about love, about pain, and about survival. The house felt peaceful, not perfect, but peaceful. Michael and Angela no longer called each other husband and wife. They referred to each other as brother and sister because that's what they were. That truth had once destroyed them. Now, it kept them honest. It kept them grounded. It reminded them to walk carefully, to live gently, and to raise their children in truth. But there was one thing the children didn't still know. They didn't know how their parents met. They didn't know how their love story ended. They didn't know why the people who once shared a bed now sat on opposite sides of the room. They knew their parents loved them deeply, but they didn't know the whole story. That was intentional. Michael and Angela had agreed that the truth would come, not through whispers or rumors, but through their own words, written with care and honesty when the time was right. So years before, Michael had written letters, one for each of his children. He had placed them in a small wooden box, tied with a red ribbon, and asked Angela to keep it safe. He had written with tears in his eyes. He had told everything, and now the time had come. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. The sun was high, but the compound was cool. Nathan and David were outside playing football with some neighborhood boys. Angela was in the kitchen humming as she prepared okra soup for dinner. Mama Grace sat quietly in the corner of the backyard peeling garden eggs and nodding to the song Angela was humming. Lucy was in her room cleaning her bookshelf. She had been preparing to go off to university in few months. Her admission had just been confirmed, and the house was full of excitement. While rearranging her books, her hand brushed against the edge of a wooden box, hidden behind some old school files. She pulled it out gently. She sat on her bed. She untied the red ribbon. Inside were neatly folded letters. One had her name written on it in her father's handwriting. To my first light, Lucy. She also saw two other letters, one labeled Nathan and another David. At the bottom of the box was a smaller note that simply said, "When you are ready, read. When your brothers are ready, share." Lucy froze. She held the letter tightly, as if afraid it would disappear. Then slowly, she opened it. The handwriting was familiar, neat, careful. She began to read. Michael's voice came alive in her mind as her eyes moved across the words. He started by telling her how much he loved her, how her birth had brought him joy, how she had given him the strength to be a father even in the hardest times. He described the day she was born, her first cry, her first steps, the way she used to crawl towards the television and slap the screen whenever cartoons came on. She smiled as she read that part. But then, the tone changed. Michael told her how he met her mother, Angela, how they fell in love, how they got married and built a life together. He described their joy, their peace, and the happiness they found in each other. Then he told her the truth. The discovery, the DNA test, the hospital confusion, the unbelievable results, the pain. He explained everything. He wrote about how they found out they were full siblings. Same mother, same blood, same father. A mistake that no one could have imagined. He told her about the shock, the shame, the fear. He wrote about how they separated, not out of anger, but out of responsibility. He told her how much it broke his heart to leave the marriage, but also how proud he was to remain in her life, as her father, as her guide. He wrote about her mother's strength, her grandmother's pain, and his hope that one day Lucy would understand everything. At the end of the letter, he wrote something that broke her. "My dear Lucy, some stories began with pain. Ours did. But pain is not the end. You were born from love, real love. Even if the world never understands it, I hope you will. You are not your parents' mistake. You are our miracle. You are the reason I never gave up. And I hope that someday you will take this truth and turn it into light for your brothers. Because your story is not shame, it is survival. And I love you always." By the time she finished reading the letter, Lucy's face was soaked with tears. She sat still for a long time. Her mind ran through every memory, every family dinner, every quiet smile between her parents, every time she asked why they lived apart and received no clear answer. Now, she knew it. She closed the letter carefully. She placed it back in the box and held it tightly against her chest. Then she stood up. She walked to the window. Outside, Nathan was sitting under the mango tree. David was trying to climb it and falling over in laughter. Mama Grace, their grandmother, was seated quietly watching them and smiling. Lucy wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and stepped out. She called her brothers' names. They ran to her, and without a word, she pulled them into a tight embrace, one arm around each of them. Her head bowed between their shoulders. She didn't tell them yet. She would wait. But in that moment, she made a quiet promise that their family's painful past would not define their future. That shame would not follow them. That their story, though built on a broken beginning, would be finished with strength, forgiveness, and love. Their grandmother stood by the doorway watching them, her eyes filled with tears. By this time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of peace. Her children had survived, and now her granddaughter was ready to lead them forward. Okay guys, we come to the end of our story. So I want to ask, what would you do if the love of your life turned out to be your own blood? This story has taken us through love, pain, Truth, heartbreak, and healing. Michael and Angela's journey reminds us that life doesn't always follow the path we expected. And sometimes, the hardest truth comes from the people we love the most. But even in the middle of the heartbreak, this story teaches us something powerful. That healing is possible. That family is more than a perfect picture. And that real love, no matter how painful, can still lead to peace. So guys, what do you think about this story? Did this break your heart too? If you were in Lucy's shoes, would you forgive your parents? Would you tell your siblings the truth? Please let me know in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you found this story powerful, emotional, or inspiring, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for watching, and always remember, no matter how broken the beginning is, your story can still end in peace. See you in the next one.